Votes are being counted in Nigeria's most competitive presidential election for decades. The process has been largely peaceful, although there have been some reports of violence in Lagos. Much of the counting is taking place by hand, though in some areas electronic voting machines are being used. The outcome isn't expected till Monday at the earliest, with pre-election opinion polls suggesting three candidates are in a close race. Well, I got more on this from my colleague Peter Okwoche, who's in Abuja, and he told us more about the election.
Traditionally in Nigeria, they've had two parties that have dominated the political scene. But this year, there was a game changer in the third contestant, Peter Obi, who out of nowhere used social media to galvanize the youth of this country. The youth make up 70% of the electorate, and they want change. So yes, it's now a three-horse race for those elections. As you mentioned, they did go rather peacefully in most of the country, but there were pockets of violence in Lagos, in Bayelsa State, which is in the oil-producing Niger Delta. But we've just heard from the head of the Electoral Commission here in Nigeria, Mahmood Yakubu. He acknowledged that there were some problems, but said counting has begun, and hopefully by tomorrow or early Tuesday, we should begin to get an idea of who the next president of Nigeria is.
Peter, whoever wins faces some really daunting challenges and huge problems in Nigeria.
You're right, Ben. I mean, sometimes you wonder why anyone would want to be the president of this country, simply because of the problems, the plethora of problems here in Nigeria. Insecurity is rife. Kidnappings for ransoms. There's a secessionist movement in the southeast of the country. In the northwest, there's banditry. Then there's a huge cash crunch, simply because a few weeks ago, the government decided to replace the old Naira notes. That's the local currency. But when people took their notes to the banks to change them to the new ones, there was a shortage. So there's a huge cash shortage here in Nigeria. There's the cost of living crisis brought upon by the war in Ukraine, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. So yes, a lot of problems on the in-tray of whoever wins these elections.
And Peter, just a last thought. I mean, how significant do you think these elections are in terms of democracy in Africa as a whole? And as an example of a really competitive election, it's good for the continent.
Absolutely. I mean, I had a chat with the former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, who's here in Nigeria as the head of the African Union Observer Mission. And he said, listen, this is a huge democracy, the largest country on the continent by population. 87,000 million people, I beg your pardon, eligible to vote. And he said, if Nigeria gets it right, that means the rest of Africa get it right. So elections of huge significance here in Nigeria, Ben.